My name is Sergii and I represent the Institute for Information Recording of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. I'm going to present a paper prepared jointly with my colleagues, Oleh who is present here, and Vitalii. This research is in a way a continuation of the studies which I already presented at the previous symposium edition. Our research objective is to improve the credibility of HP-based expert session results and reduce the labor intensity and computational complexity of decision support methods using HP without distorting or losing expert information. Well, as we all know, in order to compare n alternatives among themselves, we need to perform from n-1 to n-1 divided by 2 comparisons. So for large numbers of alternatives and for multi-leveled hierarchies, the number of comparisons becomes extremely large. So the workload upon the expert also increases. And we want to decrease this workload, basically. In our research, we relied on earlier piece of research from cognitive psychology. So Stevens and Gellenter's 1957 research of cognitive aspects of estimation process indicated that experts make minimum estimation errors when estimated objects are presented to them in a specific order, like from largest to smallest, and not vice versa or randomly. This research was conducted for tangible criteria, such as rectangle squares. So basically on this square, the actual values of squares of the rectangles are located along the diagonal of this square. So this curve 3 displays the minimum expert estimation error, and it corresponds to a specific sequence of estimates. That is, when rectangles were presented to the experts from largest to smallest. Well, this is a tangible criterion, and we decided to extrapolate the research outcomes to intangible criteria as well. So we propose to roughly rank the alternatives prior to estimation and number them accordingly from best to worst, as shown here on the slide. Then we suggest presenting these alternatives to the expert for pairwise comparison in a specific order consisting of queues. The first queue includes a single comparison of the best alternative with the worst one. The second queue includes comparisons of the first alternative with the second worst one, and the second alternative with the worst one, and so on and so forth. Each subsequent queue includes comparisons of the most distant alternatives in the ranking remaining until we reach the last queue featuring the neighboring alternative pairs. If we move along the matrix, we will witness a snake-wise move like this. So in order to suggest to test the suggested approach, we conducted an experimental study where each respondent was asked to formulate a goal or problem he or she was competent in. Then each respondent was asked to decompose the respective problem into 5 to 7 criteria and rank these criteria from best to worst. After that, respondents were required to perform 3 rounds of comparisons each, following 3 different comparison sequences. Well, sequence A was based on the suggested order, that is, comparisons of the most distant alternatives first. Sequence B was based on random comparison order, and sequence C was the opposite of sequence A, that is, the closest alternatives were compared first. After that, priority vectors were calculated based on 3 pairwise comparison matrices using eigenvector method. And finally, each respondent was required to rank 3 priority vectors presented in charts according to their correspondence to his or her inner preference structure. In general, the whole array of experimental results featured hundreds of experts. We selected 83 experiment instances devoid of rank reversals. And in 45 out of 83 cases, the respondents ranked sequence A as the best one, as shown here. Moreover, pairwise comparison matrices based on this sequence tend to be slightly more consistent than matrices based on other sequences. So these experimental results indicate that the suggested order of pairwise comparisons improves consistency of expert judgments and adequacy of expert session results. Moreover, they imply that comparisons from the first cues are more significant, that is, informative, than comparisons from the last cues. These considerations provide the basis for interesting applications and extensions of our approach. First, the approach allows us to reduce the number of pairwise comparisons in NHP if necessary. Let's consider an example of 7 alternatives ranked from best to worst. The first Q will include comparison, the single comparison of the best alternative with the worst one. That is alternatives 1 and 7. The second Q will include comparisons of alternatives 1 and 6, 2 and 7. The third Q will include comparisons of alternatives 1 and 5, 2 and 6, 3 and 7. The fourth Q, comparisons of alternative 1 and 4, 2 and 5, and so on and so forth. However, we can stop at this comparison of alternative 1 and 4, because it is at this point that the preference graph becomes fully connected. And moreover, if we remove the comparison between alternatives 2 and 6, we will get a spanning tree representing the union of 2 star-type graphs. And it will be basically the minimum, most informative comparison set. In the general case, to get such a spanning tree, we should compare the best alternative with alternatives from the second half of the ranking, and the worst alternative with alternatives from the first half of the ranking. And so it's to this spanning tree that we should add subsequent comparisons if we need a redundant set of pairwise comparisons. Since I've already mentioned spanning trees, I would say that another application of the approach is a modification of spanning tree enumeration method, in which every spanning tree can be assigned a rating or utility based on the numbers of cues its edges belong to. A tree's utility reflects its informational content. So spanning trees can be classified and sorted according to their utility-based ranking. For instance, in case of 3 alternatives, we will get 2 classes of spanning trees based on their utility. Well, not very illustrative and interesting. In case of 4 alternatives, we will get 5 classes of spanning trees based on utility or informational content. Then in case of 5 alternatives, we will get 9 classes of spanning trees based on informational content. The general idea is that under larger numbers of compared alternatives, if there is no opportunity to enumerate all the spanning trees, we can only enumerate the most informative ones with higher ranks. Thus, we can reduce the computational complexity of combinatoric spanning tree enumeration method of judgment aggregation. Well, the next logical step of the research would be to experimentally compare the suggested approach with similar ranking-dependent approaches, such as the best-worst method and the best second best, or top two. We're thinking of a simulation type experiment where first we generate a random priority vector, then we build an ideally consistent pairwise comparison matrix based on it, then we perturb it with some noise, and then calculate priorities based on the perturbed matrix using the three different methods. And finally, we compare the deviations of obtained priorities from the original ones for these three methods. The problem is that both best worst and top two methods deal with incomplete comparisons, while our approach can provide both incomplete and complete ones. I mean matrices. So there are several open questions, such as, do we need to complete incomplete matrices? And if yes, then how exactly we should complete them? And then which method exactly should we apply for priority calculation? Like eigenvector method, geometric mean, combinatoric, spanning tree enumeration method, logarithmic least squares, or some other. Well, to summarize, I would say that we have actually devised an approach that allows us to obtain more consistent and adequate expert data in AHP based on a specific order of pairwise comparisons, which depends on initial alternative ranking. The approach also provides opportunities for reduction of experts' workload and computational complexity of priority calculation algorithms. Further research will be focused on comparison of the suggested approach with other ranking-dependent pairwise comparison methods, such as best-worst and top two. These are the publications which I referred to in the presentation. And I thank you on behalf of my colleagues and Andy Warhol, a native of Pittsburgh and an ethnic Ukrainian who never forgot his origins. I think Tom Saati would have appreciated this piece of information as a concluding remark. And thank you.
We appreciate too, Sergei. And your paper seems to be quite suitable for Journal of MCDA, unless you prefer to publish somewhere else. But of course, we need to read it more thoroughly. But at first glance, it seems to be.
Well,
have you ever published in Journal of MCDA?
Yes. In 2017, jointly with my colleagues, we actually published an article, and it was on application of AHP-based approach for resource allocation in environmental protection sphere. I mean, I am just like my colleagues. You have mentioned this issue today. I mean, since you've already touched upon this journal thing, MCDA, I'm not sure about its quartile, about its impact factor. I mean, it seems to be in Q2 in terms of strategic planning category, but it seems to be in Q3 when it comes to decision sciences, decision analysis. Yeah. I've checked, maybe it somehow fell out of Q2 according, I'm not sure. I would love, that was what I had in mind. Because
so you should be attending the closing session, so that we will announce something, those participants of this conference. So we want to do something special for all of you, so that we will increase the probability of publishing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, together with my colleagues, we are already considering this option of submitting it as a. Moreover, since it's like work in progress, but it's a long time since we've started this study. During the
Yeah,
previous
so whenever you have
symposium,
time,
I mean, the article is more or less ready. There are some recent results which I've just presented, but I think that it's more or less complete, and all the basic sections of the article are already there. Okay. And I would like to address all of you guys that maybe if you're aware of any fellowships or scholarships available in your respective institutions, like both remote or on-premise ones, which we Ukrainian academics could join and participate in, then it would be nice to hear from you, because the situation here is quite unfavorable for academic research at the moment. So who knows? Yeah.
Research is really quite unfavorable for a lot of countries right now.
Yeah, but here,
not only, yeah, I know, I understand. Yeah, it's not really comparable, but there are some really.
Yeah, sure.
For example, there is one country they never support any conference participation, and academicians are not rich enough to attend these conferences unless their institution supports.
Yeah, it's just always so nice to witness good applications of AHP, to hear about them from other symposium participants. And well, we always use it as an argument in favor of like the utility and use and applicability of decision support methods when we talk to our respective potential customers, contractors. But it's really difficult to like persuade people here to move from theory, which we focus on, to applications of AHP. Well,
Sergii, you had a question from Nigel Clark in the chat.
Okay, let me check it. I'm left wondering.
Nigel, you are muted.
Thank you. I got one button, but not the other. Sergei, thank you very much for the presentation. And what came to my mind was, I'm wondering what psychological principles are at play that kind of support your conclusions. So that was that got me kind of thinking around, is it better to do it one way or the other way? So I hadn't even thought of that before, but thanks for triggering that.
Well, you see, judging from, well, not only decision support experience, but from cognitive psychology in general, people always pay attention at the leaders from one side or from the other side of the ranking. We always care, like during sports competitions, everyone cares about like first 3 places. And what comes next is, well, not so important. And when we allocate resources to projects, we select the best ones, and we do not care much about other ones. So what catches our attention is the largest alternative, whatever the criterion might be. This is the main heuristical premise which the research is based upon, and those studies from Stevens and Gallanter from the 50s, they also confirm it. And also there is a famous paper by William Wedley from 2009 symposium, where he also used alternative ranking, rough ranking, initial ranking, to try to decrease the number of pairwise comparisons needed for sufficient consistency and redundancy. So we are not the first one on this route, actually.
And did you see the consistency ratio decrease in is that how you measured success?
Well, I showed the table. Well, I will not return to the slides now anyway, but yes, consistency is slightly better. And what is interesting is that when we conducted our experiment, we did not actually think of consistency as a target criterion. We were thinking of rank reversals because first we made the respondents rank the criteria. Then we made them perform pairwise comparisons, cardinal ones. And after that, based on the pairwise comparison matrix, we calculated the weights, the priorities, but the ranking of those priorities would not necessarily coincide with the initial ranking which they provided. So in these cases, we had to just drop these experiment instances because of rank reversals. But after that, like 2 years passed, and now this year, I decided, well, why not calculate consistency of these matrices? And when we calculated consistency, well, we had like very high consistency ratios. Maybe you have noticed that all those average values are above 10% threshold suggested by Tom Saati. But we did not have consistency in mind. And still, the sequence which we suggested based on the ranking, it slightly improves this consistency, which is, well, I would say a very encouraging result.